The adventures of Team Coffee continue in RWBY Before the Dawn. Written by E.C. Myers, story by Miles Luna and Carrie Shawcross. This time, Team Coffee is joined by Team Sun in their adventures at Shade Academy. This book just released yesterday on July 21st, so guess what I spent 7 hours last evening doing? I honestly picked up this book, started reading, and didn't really want to stop at all. This is a really good book, and if you have read After the Fall, or would like to and continue on to Before the Dawn, I highly recommend picking up a copy of this, because it is a really good book to expand the RWBY universe, gives expansion to Team Coffee and Team Sun in particular, and they pack a lot into these 320 pages. It has some pretty interesting implications for the future of RWBY and some of the semblances that we might see, or the power level of the semblances we might see moving forward in the RWBY series. So in this video, I'm going to give my breakdown and analysis of Before the Dawn, and there'll be other videos coming later that break down the semblances and other little things that are in Before the Dawn that I may not include in this video, but definitely spoiler warning for the events that take place in Before the Dawn, because I will be going over pretty much all of them. So if you would like to read the book unspoiled, come back to this video later on after you have read Before the Dawn. But without further ado, let's get into the breakdown. Now, the first couple chapters of Before the Dawn were released previously about a month ago in a preview for the book. I've made a separate video breaking that down in greater detail, but I will go over that briefly here. So the book itself starts off with Sun on his own out in the early hours of the morning. He notices 3 thugs pursuing a girl into a back alley, so Sun decides to step in. The girl does end up getting away, but Sun ends up fighting these 3 thugs. He thinks he has the advantage because, well, he has a semblance that can create clones of himself, and he's a huntsman in training. Currently a 3rd year, I believe, because Team Coffee is a year ahead of Team Sun, I think, because I know Team Coffee is in their final year, but so Sun thinks that, well, he should be able to take them. He notices that they don't have as much training hand-to-hand combat as Sun does, so he decides to get in that fight and is pretty confident starting out. He creates his 2 clones, so it's 3v3, and he quickly finds out that he's way outmatched. All of these 3 characters that he's fighting, who we only know as Pink, Brown, and Green, their color associations, all of them have their own semblances and are incredibly strong. Not so much in their fighting styles or training, but the fact that their aura is pretty much unfazed with every blow that Sun deals against them, seeming more like a nuisance rather than actually dealing damage. On the flip side, Sun is taking damage with every hit, his aura is constantly being reduced, and after one decisive blow, both of his clones phase out and he's in pretty dire straits. As the 3 goons close in, Velvet and Yatsuhashi jump in to save the day and make the fight actually 3 versus 3. But even with Velvet and Yatsuhashi there, as they are trading blows with 2 of the thugs, they don't seem to be able to do anything against their aura either. They seem nearly invincible, as Yatsuhashi states later on. The 3 goons can get a bit tired of this though and decide that it's probably not worth it. They use Green's semblance to create gas from his aura and create a smokescreen to escape. So, leaving Sun, Velvet, and Yatsuhashi there. Velvet and Yatsuhashi aren't as familiar with the city, so Sun guides them back to Shade Academy, and on the way, Velvet and Yatsuhashi say that they were out investigating the Crown, trying to find any information on them. The organization that hired Bertolac and Carmen back in After the Fall to hunt and kidnap characters with strong semblances, for whatever purpose that may be. And Sun, finding this out, that Team Coffee is on their own little special mission, just on one of his whims, volunteers himself and the rest of his team to help in that investigation. Of course, without consulting them first, as Sun does. Skipping forward to breakfast, where Team Sun and Team Coffee are having a little group-to-group meeting, and Coco is very much enjoying the fact that Velvet and Yatsuhashi had to jump in to save Sun. Because, well, it kind of knocks Team Sun down a bit of a peg, as when Team Sun assisted Team Coffee and showed up back at Shade Academy, it kind of knocked Team Coffee down a peg in the eyes of everyone else at Shade. Because Team Coffee's reputation preceded them from Beacon to Shade. They were a hotshot team and, you know, were doing very well for themselves. But already, the people of Vacuo, the other classmates at Shade Academy, didn't see them too kindly because they were refugees from Beacon. And similarly, with the refugees that are currently coming in from Haven Academy, the Vacuans see that as they abandoned their kingdom. When they should have stayed and fought, they showed weakness and fled. So the Vacuans definitely don't see kindly to that, and that's a recurring theme throughout this book. That Vacuans would stay and protect what they have left, etc., whereas they don't look kindly on weakness and fleeing, that type of thing. Meanwhile, though, during this discussion, as Sun is saying that they'll help, well, Scarlet is not exactly on board with that. He is in constant conflict with Sun because Sun is always doing everything on a whim without consulting his team first. He first abandoned his team to head to the Vital Festival tournament in Volume 1. We don't really know if he told his team about doing that. He just up and left, and he did the same thing again after the fall of Beacon Academy, when his team needed him most, after they went through that traumatic event, seeing other students around them die, being turned on by the Elysian Army, the Grimm, the White Fang. A lot happened at the fall of Beacon, and Sun just took off to chase Blake, and I don't think he consulted his team much at that point, leaving them to return to Haven Academy to attend the next semester on their own without Sun. But they did make somewhat better of it because they turned Sun's room into a game room, we find out later on, so, you know, at least they had some fun with it. But still, Scarlet is definitely at odds with Sun, and Sage is on Scarlet's side, whereas Neptune seems to be on Sun's side, though he has a bit of qualms with him. Eventually, though, Team Coffee does discuss it amongst themselves using Fox's TeamSpeak, his telepathy, and they decide, you know what, may as well have them join, because it'd be more useful to have more people. Sun knows the city, people would talk to him easier since he is originally from Vacuo, whereas most people don't want to talk to people who abandoned Beacon or Haven, etc., so Sun would be useful, and besides, he's probably going to get involved anyways, so they decide to let them join. But they need to get Runepole's permission first, because Scarlet's not okay with going behind Runepole's back. He seems a bit stingy on that and just not really happy in general. Very understandable, though, considering Sun's attitude. So Team Coffee heads to class, and this is where we first encounter Professor Runepole, likely based on Rumpelstiltskin given her short stature, about 4 feet tall, and her aesthetic being largely based on gold, with other things about her being based on gold as well. But Team Coffee heads to the class, and this is where Professor Runepole is giving a lecture on the history of Vacuo. Coco takes the opportunity to ask a question that might agitate some other students, but also get the hint across about the Crown. She asks about the time when the Crown ruled Vacuo, how some people, you know, want the Vacuo to go back to that time, how it was a better time when they still had dust and other resources, etc. You know, something that made native Vacuans a bit uncomfortable, but still something that got her point across by emphasizing the word the Crown. In this class, we also see some other choice characters, in particular members of Team Auburn, who we saw at the Vital Festival tournament. They have come from Haven Academy as well to Shade Academy, arrived a few weeks before Sun, we later find out, but still, they're there and they're relevant to the overall story, though not as much as other characters we will get to in a bit. Now, after class, Team Coffee stays behind, and Runepole addresses their real question about the Crown. She hasn't even brought the information to Professor Theodore yet. Team Coffee has been questioning her about that for a little while now, saying, you know, this needs to be brought to Theodore's attention. The Crown is going to be something that could hurt Vacuo in the long run, and we need to address this now. But Runepole is doing her own investigations and says that we need to have something substantial to bring to him, etc. And I can't assign this to you as an official mission because that would just draw too much attention, etc. Essentially, she's implying to Team Coffee, keep it under the radar, don't draw too much attention to yourselves, because then we're gonna have to make Theodore aware of it, and we're gonna have to put restrictions on you. So Team Coffee takes the hint and continues on their investigations under the radar. Now, this is when they go to the Weeping Wall, a monument in Vacuo that is kind of just a rock formation that just hasn't been taken by the desert yet, and after rains or from a water reservoir, etc., water sometimes trickles down the porous rock. So it's kind of a monument in Vacuo. And people have started using this monument as a place to post missing pictures. And there seems to be dozens, if not hundreds of them, of people that are missing, that have gone missing in the past year and have just vanished without a trace. And people don't know where they are. Team Coffee and Team Sun go there. We also find out on the way there that that Sun has a cousin who has a dojo in Vacuo, and he hasn't gone to tell his family that he's back. So Sun has some family history that doesn't seem to be worked out at this point. They still head to the Weeping Wall, and they encounter a couple people there who are missing their relatives. In particular, one girl shows up and says, "My sister went missing." They ask if, well, did she have a strong semblance? Well, not particularly. She had a semblance that could make things sticky, but other than that, no. She was just she just went missing. She went to a fight club 2 nights back and never came back. So that gives them the hint that maybe this club has something involved with it. Next we see everyone back at Shade Academy, where Team Coffee is hosting a meeting of the Beacon Brigade, a kind of secretive group that Team Coffee set up, including the students that were there at the fall of Beacon. And people are only allowed in by invite, group vote, etc. And now Team Sun has been invited to join this. And Sun is not really happy about what the Beacon Brigade represents, at least what he's seeing it represent. That they are a secretive group meeting outside of everyone from Vacuo, just showing that they are even more separate from Vacuo, holding on to Beacon Academy and, you know, keeping their mindset there at Beacon rather than being grounded in Vacuo where they actually are. So Sun's definitely in opposition to this, but the members of the Beacon Brigade are quite interesting. There's the entirety of Team Auburn: Arsalan Altain, Bolin Hori, Nadir Shiko, and Reese Chloris. But there is also one other person that is very important in this: Nolan Porforio, the lone survivor of Team Bronze. The rest of Team Bronze is now confirmed dead. We knew from after the fall that Roy Stallion was carried off by an Evermore and was dead, but the rest of the team at that time was missing in action. But now that Nolan is here, he has serious survivor's guilt and confirms that Mei, Zedong, and Bronze Ni are in fact deceased. And this group is, the purpose of it is kind of to show support for everyone there as they experience something that no one else truly understands unless they were there. After seeing Beacon fall, the White Fang, the Grim, the Atlesian Paladins turn on them, and having to experience all of this, it was a lot. And, you know, there's a lot of trauma that goes along with that, as we see from Nolan having survivor's guilt, saying that he should have died there. He should have died along with the rest of his team. And he channels that into more motivation moving forward, saying that he's not going to run again, that he's not going to, you know, abandon the fight, that type of thing. Still though, it's kind of traumatic thinking that there is someone who watched his entire team die. I've seen that in a couple of stories of OCs as well, and that's really traumatic for someone to go through. But anyways, Sun kind of goes in a bit of an outburst saying that this is just showing that you are separate from Vacuo. It's not Vacuin at all, and he ends up storming out. Velvet goes after him and kind of calms him down a little bit and says, you know, we'll see you in the next meeting, but we'll see you at Stakeout later tonight, because they're going out on their missions investigating for the crown later on. And that's exactly what they're doing. Velvet and Yatsuhashi are out, you know, patrolling the perimeters for Grim, as it seems Grim attacks have been increasing as of late, and Fox and Coco are staking out a gambling house, whereas Sun and Neptune are out investigating on their own. Similarly, Sage and Scarlet are standing guard at Shade Academy, at the wall, in case anyone goes to attack Shade Academy. Because if the Crown is hunting people with strong semblances, the Academy seems to have a pretty good target on its back, considering, well, the Huntsman Academy would have the highest concentration of strong semblances for miles, probably in the entirety of Vacuo. So yeah, that does make sense. But as Fox and Coco are staking out the gambling house, they see 2 characters walk out as they're kind of escorting someone. And these 2 characters are claiming to be huntsmen. The huntsmen should all be out guarding the walls and guarding against Grim, so it's kind of odd that these 2 are there, and they're kind of bullying this guy, saying, oh, you know, you never know what could happen to you on the way home. Give us a little money and we'll guide you back, and everything like that. The guy's saying, you know, I'm fine, I don't need it, but sure, whatever, I'll give you a little bit of my winnings, because he won a lot at the gambling house apparently, and so they start guiding him home. Except, of course, they're not actually guiding him home. We should have turned left back there. Oh no, this is a shortcut, don't worry. No, it actually isn't a shortcut. Well, anyways, you're coming with us, so it turns straight into a kidnapping, and this is when Coco and Fox step in. Turns out that these 2 huntsmen are actually green and brown from the night before that Sun fought, and, well, they end up fleeing. Fox ends up tailing them at a distance, at least, because he can kind of sense where their auras are, and once he gets a fix on a person, he can kind of pick them out of a crowd, etc. But these 2 auras seem weird, like they're actually identical auras, because as Fox describes, every person, every soul is never identical. Their aura is always somewhat different. Even if it's the same color, it's always slightly different, but these 2 seemed exactly identical. So Fox was easily able to follow them, in particular because their auras seemed brighter than normal as well. So as he tailed them to an odd building that was made out of metal and brick. Something that's not really made out of in Vacuo, because most huts and buildings are easy to put up, easy to take down, but this one was more solid and also 5 stories tall, so it stood out a bit like a sore thumb, but it was on the outskirts of town. Velvet and Yatsuhashi end up showing up to help Fox, and as Fox is kind of sensing the inside of the building, he notices about 50 people or so in there that all have identical auras, including one of them being Professor Runepole. Yatsuhashi goes to try to break down the door, but it's made out of metal, and even with his immense strength and fulcrum, he doesn't really do much against it. Someone opens up the slot, though, and asks them, what do we fight for? Asking for a password, and they have no idea how to answer, so the door's slammed in their face, and once sensing Runepole in there, they decide, well, maybe we should just head back to the academy. Because, if Professor Runepole wants us to stay out of things, then this is probably her investigation. She probably wants to be there, so maybe we should just head back. And that's what they do, and leave it till the next morning. Coco decides that she's going to go confront Runepole and ask what the hell was going on, but 8 a.m. in the morning, there's an announcement that goes out, and she doesn't get the chance to do that, because everyone is called to the little plateau that's at the top of Shade Academy, and this is where Professor Runepole and Professor Theodore, Headmaster Theodore, are going to address everyone. And this is where we see Theodore for the first time, and he's a character to say the least. The best way I can describe him is a hype man. You know that guy that you kind of see like at concerts or at sporting events, etc., that's always just raising his fists and like fake punching at people, like trying to entice people and get them rallied up? That's literally what he does in the book. And he entices one of the students to come to the ring and actually spar with him. Like in the middle of a crowd of students, like a friggin' mosh pit, he's out there trying to spar with them, and he is just very different than any other headmaster, let alone any other professor we've seen thus far in the RWBY series. I'm really looking forward to seeing his character on screen, though, because he looks like he would be amazing. The dude is chiseled, he's got a lot of strength in him, and the way he fights is he's just a brawler. Him and Yang would get along so well, especially considering he uses kind of gauntlets or gloves as well. RWBY gloves, by the way, that he likes to click together, much like, RWBY slippers in The Wizard of Oz. So yeah, Theodore is definitely based on Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, and I probably should have realized this sooner in my preview video for Before the Dawn. I said that we didn't exactly know what Theodore was based on, but someone in the comments below said, or at least a couple people did, that if you rearrange the letters of Theodore, you pretty much get Dorothy, so yeah, it's pretty obvious that Theodore is based on Dorothy. Anyways, Runepole puts an end to the little hype session that Theodore is starting to cook up. He doesn't actually get to spar with the student that he called forward, but still they go up on stage and they make a very important announcement. Runepole is the one actually addressing the crowd. Mostly, she seems to be more of the brains of the operation, giving Theodore advice on how to proceed forward, whereas Theodore is the just one who actually makes the official decisions, is inducted into Ozpin's inner circle, etc. If Runepole was inducted into Ozpin's inner circle, that could spell some bad things later on, but I'll get to that. Now, the message that Runepole gives to everyone is that there have been students from this academy that have been causing trouble for the city of Vacuo, have been interfering with civilians and regular police work, etc. So we need to address that in some way. There have been kind of a seclusion between the students that have come from Beacon Academy and Haven Academy, as well as the students that were initially at Shade Academy to begin with. So the first thing she does is put a curfew in place, preventing students from going out after dark, etc., and Coco's kind of being hard on herself, thinking that this was because of everything they did the night before, but the second announcement is much more important. As of now, all of your current teams are dissolved, and now we are going to go straight into the re-initiation ceremony. All of the students from Shade Academy have been through the initiation already, so this time it's going to be a little bit different. But now, you are all going to be judged on your performance during this and assigned new teams. So immediately at this point, Team Coffee is dissolved, and I knew this going into the book. It was part of the preview for the entire thing that Theodore had the new idea to create new teams, and on its surface, it's a good idea to kind of create unity between the students from Shade, from Vale, and from Mistral, from Haven and Beacon, and yes, I get it. However, when there's storm brewing, attack coming. You don't want to disrupt teams that have been fighting together for years and have their own flow and know each other's battle styles and everything like that. It seems not the greatest of idea, and it seems a lot of the teams, even the ones who are initially from Shade Academy, don't really agree with this, even though they all love Professor Theodore. But immediately, a couple airships show up and start taking the students off, and there are enough students that they start flooding the ships, and all of Team Coffee gets separated. They initially had the idea to stick together and try to make it so that they could be on the same team again, especially Velvet and Yatsuhashi. Yatsuhashi trying to push himself through the crowd to reach Velvet, but the doors to the airship that she was dragged onto close before he can, and he ends up on a different airship. So yeah, all of Team Coffee is separated, and so they go to the re-initiation. We take the initiation from Velvet's perspective, and she's on an airship who also has Sun on the airship, and Scarlet at the same time. So they are flying out to the desert, and they're hoping that they're all going to be in the same situation, so Velvet can go find, Yatsuhashi, the rest of her team, etc. But as they're over the desert, well, people, or it seems the headmasters, like to drop the students from high and see if they can survive. Because the doors to the ship just open up and they drop everyone outwards. They have to find their own way to the ground. Velvet, being the smart person that she is, since the entire rules are just survive, grab a gold trinket that's somewhere out in the desert and make it to the airship coordinates that will be on your scroll after you obtain this little gold trinket. So there's nothing against just stealing a parachute from the back of the ship and jumping out. She gives one to Sun and is able to go down. So yeah, that's pretty good way of surviving the initiation if you can just find a parachute. If only they had those at Beacon Academy. Oh well. But still, this is where the initiation gets really interesting, because as Velvet sees that the other airships are miles away, that there's no way she's going to be able to make it to them, she's very kind of worried about who her partner is going to end up being. And in particular, Velvet does not want to get paired with anyone from Team Indigo, the team that fought against Team Sun and lost in the Vital Festival tournament, consisting of Nebula Violet, Dew Gale, Gwen Darcy, and Octavia Ember. Apparently, these four girls had been very mean towards anyone from Beacon Academy or Haven Academy, constantly berating them for being weak and abandoning their homes. So apparently, Team Indigo, not very nice when it comes down to it, which, they were a little bit arrogant during the Vital Festival tournament, but it's still kind of surprising to see this turn in their personalities. So, as Velvet is going through this initiation, of course, guess who it is that she runs into? A member of Team Indigo. My favorite member, actually, because I really like the weapon that she has, but Octavia Ember, who is not very happy to be running into Velvet, but they end up tagging along together anyways. And they end up investigating a chasm that was used as a dust mine in the past when Atlas and Mistral were taking everything that Vacuo had, and this is a physical scar left on Vacuo by that time. As they're investigating this chasm, though, Velvet is able to spot a glowing trinket, or a little gold trinket, at the top of a scraggly tree that's in this chasm, and Octavia ends up running up quickly to go and grab it, and when she does, she ends up falling from the tree, because when she got to the top, she awoke a whole bunch of Ravagers. So Velvet is able to catch Octavia, and thanks her for the save, etc., but, now they have to deal with a whole bunch of Ravagers. Luckily, though, Octavia was able to grab the gold trinket, and their scrolls are now blinking with the location of the Airbus, so they just hightail it to it. Octavia had previously told Velvet, if things get tough during this reinitiation, don't run away like you did at Beacon, but now she's kind of changed her tune. Remember what I said before about not running? Yeah, let's do that, let's run. And so they do. They try to take out a couple of the Ravagers on their way, but there's too many of them to deal with. They get to the Airbus, as luckily Sun was there and told the pilot to wait, but they were the last two to arrive, and the Airbus takes off to go back to Shade Academy. And this is where we get the reveal of all of the new teams that were formed in the next meeting of the Beacon Brigade. Although they are members of new teams, they are still, meeting as part of the Beacon Brigade, though they didn't invite the rest of their teams, especially considering Team Indigo was just mean to all the people from Beacon Academy, Haven Academy. Wouldn't go over that well, but they're still free to meet outside of this. So even though Team Coffee and Team Sun aren't members of the same team anymore, they can still interact, etc. They just won't be going out on missions together and all of that. Team Coffee, of course, very upset that their team is broken up. Team Sun seems more happy about that, including Sun himself. But let's get into what these teams actually are, as there are 5 new teams that we were introduced to, consisting of all of the members of Team Coffee and Team Sun, as well as a number of the members from Team Indigo and Team Auburn, also with Nolan Porforio, the last remaining member of Team Bronze. And then there's a number of new characters that are mentioned as well, likely introduced to make the naming scheme of the teams work. A couple of them are expanded upon in the course of this novel, but a number of them are also only mentioned in name only and not given any further context. But the first team that we are introduced to is Team Rosie, consisting of Reese Cloris, Olive Gashley, Scarlett David, and Coco Adele. Now, Olive Gashley is obviously a new character, likely a student of Shade Academy before this, not a refugee from Beacon or Haven, but she is a wolf faunus, and I would really like to get an expansion on her character, as we do get to see a bit of her fighting style later on, and she fights with gravity dust, which is something I'm always interested in seeing more fights with different kinds of dust and how characters utilize them, so I would really like to see her in the series moving forward. Plus, Scarlett and Coco have such an interesting dynamic throughout the course of this novel. They kind of get a kinship together, and Scarlett's growth throughout the course of this story is really interesting, and I'm really liking Scarlett a lot in this novel and his development overall. The next team we get is Team Byrne, with Bolin Hori, Yatsuhashi Daichi, Rei Noir, and Neptune Vasilius. Now, Rei Noir, another new character. We don't get any more expansion on this character other than they used to be, or they are, a student of Shade Academy, not a refugee from Beacon or Haven. And then we get Team C, consisting of Sage Ayana, Sun Wukong, Electra Fury, and Ariadne Guimet, I'm gonna guess is the last name, how you say that last name? Guimet? Something like that. Anyways, Electra and Ariadne, we don't get anything further from them other than just their names, but it's interesting to see that Sage is now leading the team instead of Sun, and Sun has absolutely no problem with this. Unfortunately, Sage is really not given much in this overall novel as a whole, considering it's a novel that focuses on all of Team Coffee and all of Team Sun. There had to be choices made into what characters to focus on, and unfortunately, Sage really just didn't get any of the spotlight. He had a few lines here and there, but really we don't learn anything more about his character. And unfortunately, we don't get his semblance either. We do get Sage's and Neptune's though, but I'll cover that in a video later on. The next team we get is Team Nova. I love the name of Team Nova, but it consists of Nebula Violet, Octavia Ember, Velvet Scarlatina, and Arslan Altan. This is a powerhouse team if I've ever seen one. Arslan is an incredible character, a very skilled fighter, the most skilled member, I would argue, of Team Auburn, having saved them during the Vital Festival tournament, and is a hell of a leader in and of herself. And then Nebula and Octavia, definitely good characters. I wish we saw more of them in the Vital Festival tournament, and I hope we see more of them later on, possibly in another book if there is a sequel to this, but still kind of sucks for Velvet, considering that she's now on a team with 2 members of Team Indigo, so, yeah, her not wanting to be on a team with any of Team Indigo kind of didn't pan out in that sense. But then the last team we get is Team Fondue, consisting of Fox Alastair, Nolan Porfirio, Dew Gale, and Umber Gorgonia. Now, this team is interesting. It doesn't really go into the dynamics of it. We don't really see Dew Gale at all in the novel other than this. Nolan does have some interesting interactions with Scarlett, actually, and they might be a couple later on. I don't know. It seems like they have a pretty good friendship going on, and Scarlett is definitely taking interest in him, calling him a pretty boy throughout, so maybe there might be something there. I'd be interested in see that moving forward, because I'd really like them to actually build a relationship and Scarlett be kind of a support for Nolan, and it kind of seems to be leading that way towards the end of the novel. Umber Gorgonia, though, is one of the characters that we do get an expansion upon later in the book. However, these are the 5 teams right now, and some of their interactions are pretty interesting. We don't get to see all of them, unfortunately, as there just wasn't enough time to expand upon all of that in the book. Completely understandable. Having so many characters that they need to cover, they need to, focus on the points that move the plot forward. However, I'm glad to see that there are quite a few new interactions. But in this meeting of the Beacon Brigade, we see how Sun is reacting towards everyone, being invited there again. It's the same as before. He's saying that you all are trying to separate yourselves from Vacuo. This time, though, everyone kind of sits him down and says that's not what we're trying to do here. We took the name Beacon as kind of our clan name. That everyone in Vacuo, or the many tribes in Vacuo, have their own clan names, that they're loyal to their own tribes, and things like that. They are there to support each other under the banner of Beacon. It is more the ideals of Beacon rather than holding on to the place itself. And once Sun starts seeing it that way, he comes to understand. He also points out, though, that this just goes to show that native Vacuans aren't going to see it that way, and you might have to explain yourselves quite a bit moving forward. But still, at least they're all under an understanding right now. And then we get to the weapons training class, led by Professor Sunnybrook. Or at least it typically is. This time, though, Professor Runepole kind of storms in, acting very much out of character, and takes control of the entire class. This time, she says that, well, everyone's too reliant on their weapons and their semblances, so today we're going to have you all fight 1 versus 1 with weapons that you're not used to. And so she calls on a couple of volunteers, Velvet Scarlatina and Nebula Violet, which quite a few people object to because they are on the same team. Not to mention that Nebula is the leader of her team, and if she beats down one of her members, or one of her members beats down her, that's not really going to do great for team morale, but Runepole doesn't care, silences everyone in the crowd, and puts Nebula and Velvet in the center of the stage. They're in an arena that's covered by sand, and a pillar rises up in the middle that gives them their weapons. One is a spear, one is a club. Velvet gets to choose first, she picks the spear, Nebula gets the club, and they just brawl. They fight it out, and Nebula is kind of poking fun at Velvet, saying that Velvet's weaker than her because she stayed at Beacon and wasn't able to do anything, whereas Nebula saw that it was a lost cause immediately and said it wasn't worth her time and just fled anyways. So, you know, definitely a bit of a conflict here, but as the fight goes on, Velvet's able to hold her own and actually reveals a bit more about her semblance, her photographic memory, that she can not only memorize all of the fighting styles of the different people that she's seen fight, but also call upon them and flow seamlessly from one to another using different weapons and have many different combinations with them. That she has her own unique fighting style by combining all of the fighting styles that she has in her memory. I figured that Velvet could do this with her photographic memory, but it's nice to have confirmation. And also means that going over her analysis for the Phoenix Festival tournament, especially the exhibition match that's coming up between her and Coco, is going to be kind of a nightmare, because she can have literally every fighting style that we've seen in the RWBY show, or at least every fighting style that Velvet could have logically seen, and could add that with hard light dust weapons and use them in endless combinations, etc. So she's the most versatile fighter we have ever seen in the entirety of the RWBY series, just pointing that out now. However, when she's fighting against Nebula, she is holding her own for a time, but Nebula does get the upper hand, and eventually deals one blow from above that kind of plants Velvet into the sand, and her legs get stuck, so she can't move. Her aura has been depleted to a low point at this time, and it's obviously Nebula's victory, because Velvet's just stuck and aura low, etc. So, you know, normally it would be called there. However, Runepole isn't going to have that. She tells them to simply keep fighting. Keep fighting until someone can't move anymore. That's the real world. That's what's going to happen, so may as well have that here in training. The rest of the students aren't very happy with that, and the rest of Team Coffee, as well as Arslan, step up and, you know, protect Velvet. They help her up, and Velvet, of course, not being happy about being protected yet again, but still this was too far that Runepole was pushing it, very much out of character from what we had seen previously in the novel, so, yeah. And they all object, saying that this isn't what we're meant to do in training, in sparring, etc. Runepole ends up storming out, and Sunnybrook says, well, I guess that's class dismissed, having lost control of her entire class, etc., giving excuses for Runepole that she's under so much stress, she's dealing with so many things, etc., just avoiding the questioning from all the students as to what just happened here. So, yeah. Runepole definitely acting strange. And then we cut to Team Nova's mission that they were immediately assigned after that to go to Oscuro Academy and repair one of the relay towers, or guard a technician as he was repairing one of the relay towers. Now, the Oscuro Academy is the combat school that precedes the Huntsman Academies, or one of the combat schools that precedes the Huntsman Academies. This one is in the settlement of Kakina, where Gus Caspian and Edward Caspian, the two characters that were introduced in After the Fall, went to live. Gus is attending Oscuro Academy in an effort to get a better control of his semblance. You know, that one that amplifies people's negative emotions and could bring down entire settlements on his own? Yeah, that one. The kid with the extremely powerful semblance. And so when Team Nova goes there to help them out, the combat school gives them some students to give them some more hands-on experience, and that doesn't go all that well. The technician that they're meant to guard ends up getting injured and knocked out, so Velvet ends up working on the relay tower herself and ends up fixing it herself, and Gus is there with her giving medical aid to this technician, where the rest of Team Nova, Nebula, Octavia, and Arsalan are all out fighting the Grimm that ended up attacking. And they're also there with some of the students from the combat school. And guess what Nebula and Octavia decide to do? They start using the children as decoys for the Grimm. Yeah, Team Indigo is not the best team, it seems, at least when it comes to moral standards. Velvet obviously disagrees with this, as well as Arsalan, and they both kind of berate Octavia for this kind of action, and Octavia ends up hanging up on them once Velvet gets the scrolls back up, etc. But Velvet does kind of understand that there is another side to Octavia that she saw during the initiation, but still, Indigo is definitely a little bit different than what I thought of them in the Vital Festival tournament. Granted, we only saw them for like one episode, half an episode, but still, I'm surprised that Team Indigo is kinda heartless. Anyways, we do learn one little thing about Edward from a conversation between Velvet and Gus. That Edward, he was the old man that was in after the fall, who had a lot of memory issues from his old age and a neurodegenerative disease, is doing better now, thanks to a little memory manipulation that Yatsuhashi did to him, as well as teaching him meditation techniques. The guy's able to remember things a bit easier, and it seems that Yatsuhashi's semblance can do more than just make people forget. And Velvet recalls what Glinda Goodwitch used to say, that semblances grow the more you use them. They're like a muscle. As you train them, they can grow, and you might find that they have more abilities than what you initially thought. Semblances evolve, etc. And considering Yatsuhashi never really experimented with his semblance, considering he doesn't like his semblance, he kind of fears it, it makes sense that there might be something else involved with it. But anyways, we cut back to the Shade Academy, or at least the city of Vacua, where Neptune and Sun are out interrogating, well, not interrogating, but questioning people who are related to those that are missing on the Weeping Wall. And they're currently questioning one Finn Asturias about, you know, where his children went, because both of his kids, Jill and Jack and Jill, are missing. And he's a bit of an oddball, considering that he has no dust technology in his house, no technology of any kind, and when Sun pulls out his scroll, he tells him, well, could you please take that out of my house? I don't allow Atlesian technology in here, etc. So Sun leaves and leaves Neptune alone to question the guy. And as Sun walks outside, he encounters Velvet, and she's on her way to a fight club, because she got an email saying that, well, this is the Mirage Fight Club. Come fight for crown and kingdom, you know, kind of a promotional banner, etc. And Sun was just like, wow, that's more interesting than, you know, questioning this boring guy in that house. He's got no technology, etc. So he just goes with Velvet. He does text Neptune, though, and tells him, hey, this is where we're going. Don't tell anyone. So at least keeping him in the loop, but still telling him not to tell anyone. So, you know, interesting dynamic there. And so Sun and Velvet head to the Mirage Fight Club. And upon arriving at the location, they find that it is the exact same building that Fox had tracked those two people with identical aura to just a few nights before, and saw all these other people with identical aura in as well. So they knock on the door and are greeted with the exact same response that they had before. Asked, what do you fight for? And Sun immediately responds, we fight for crown and kingdom, as he noticed the little phrase at the bottom of the email that Velvet had, and the door swings open. It was the correct passcode. And they are greeted by a dude who immediately asks for all of their dust and weapons. Sun reluctantly hands over his, but Velvet is able to pass off Anisadora as nothing more than a camera, and so she's allowed to pass with it. When they enter the building, they find a room where there's a giant cage in the middle of it, where people are literally fighting cage matches. That they fight with no weapons, no dust, just their fists and their semblances until their opponent goes down and stays down. And then there are a bunch of people around the cage cheering them on. There are aura meters up so you can see how each person is doing, and yeah, little cage matches are going on. But even the more interesting part about that is one of the people who is currently in the cage, Umber Gorgonian. one of the members of Team Fondue, along with Fox Alistair. Now, she is not doing so well in the battle. It seems her opponent is larger and stronger than her and is beating her. The aura is a little bit lower on the screen, but that all changes once Umber drops her glasses and makes eye contact with her opponent, activating her semblance of stone glance. Her opponent is then petrified and Umber can then counterattack. So, given her name of Umber Gorgonian, Gorgon, she's obviously based off of the Gorgons and Medusa from Greek mythology. Her semblance revolves around eye contact and paralyzing her foes. Oh, and we also find out that she fights with her weapons being whips later on. So there's a lot of similarities to a character that I created. It seems like myself and someone on the writing team had a lot of similar ideas when it came to basing a character off of Greek mythology and Medusa, etc. Because Zelina Ray, my own character, also has a semblance that relies on making eye contact and fights with whips, and she's a snake faunus on top of that, but still there are definitely parallels there. Anyways, before doing anything or approaching the cage in any way, Velvet notices something on the wall and pulls Sun over and takes a picture of it. Of course, this pisses people off, but Velvet is able to pass it off as, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot for a moment, etc. But what she wanted to take a picture of was a golden sai that was hanging on the wall. One of Carmen Esclados's sai, or at least a replica of it, because this was made completely out of gold and would be weird for Carmen's, weapon to be made out of gold or turn into gold, etc. But still, this is an easy signal that Carmen Esclados is at least connected to the place. Though, next thing Velvet wants to do is go to the cage match and warn Umber. Umber ends up winning against her opponents, and the announcer starts looking for another volunteer who wants to take the crown from our current champion. And Velvet volunteers herself. But as she's headed up to the stage, Sun creates a clone with his semblance that appears right in front of Velvet and says, no, pick me instead. The announcer initially says, no, sorry, match is already going to be set, we're going to have the girlies fight each other. And then someone comes over, whispers in his ear and says, actually, change of plans. Blondie, get in there. And Velvet turns to Sun saying, you idiot, essentially, because I was going in there to warn Umber that these cage matches were probably to find people with strong semblances so they could, get them into the crown and kidnap them, etc. Sun realizes, like, oh crap, and what did I just do? Oh yeah, displayed my semblance for everyone to see, and that's why they switched it to let Blondie go into the cage. So this is where that chapter ends and leaves off. We don't exactly see what's going to happen with them just yet, but Sun is a little bit too impulsive at times, and you can easily see where his team's frustration is coming from with some of his antics. So, yeah. Anyways, we cut back to Shade Academy, where we see Neptune, after he's been done questioning all the people, he's going back to his room to go make notes, but as he gets to his room, he hears a knock on the door. And initially he ignores it, but then he hears the voice in his head of Fox. It's Fox and Yatsuhashi, and they're not very happy. This picture that Velvet was able to take of Carmen Esclados' sai, she was able to send to Fox and Yatsuhashi. And so they're obviously very curious as to where Sun and Velvet are. And so they come to question Neptune. But Neptune's been told not to say anything, so he continues to do so even though Fox and Yatsuhashi start interrogating him, to the point where it ends up that Yatsuhashi's dangling him over a fountain. And we know Neptune's aversion to water. It's not necessarily a fear. At this point we get to Neptune's backstory and find out what his semblance is, as well as what started his aversion or fear of water, depending on how you want to call it. Neptune himself says it's not necessarily a fear, but it's definitely an aversion, but still, I'll cover that in a separate video when I go over the new semblances that were all displayed in this novel. However, Yatsuhashi decides at the last moment, this isn't him, he doesn't want to be mean, he puts Neptune down, and at that point, Neptune nonchalantly drops his scroll. Oh no, I hope you don't go through my messages and find out everything, so that he found the loophole. He didn't actually say anything, he didn't tell anyone, but they found out anyways, etc. Before anyone can leave and go anywhere though, Yatsuhashi and Fox, as they're going to leave, it's after dark, Runepole shows up and says, no, there's a curfew in place, you're not going anywhere, and immediately starts fighting all of them. Because Fox and Yatsuhashi are determined to go no matter what. They're going to support Velvet, they're going to go rescue her, etc. Runepole ain't having it, so it turns into a pretty large fight. The students and even Headmaster Theodore comes to witness this. Theodore himself likes to fight, will also challenge students, etc., so he's all for it and just watching the fight happen, not intervening in any way, shape, or form, and we see what Runepole's fighting capabilities actually are. Underneath her long brown hair, she stores a disc on her back with a gold thread around it that she can whip outwards almost like a frisbee on a ribbon type thing. It's still pretty strong though, as she can whip it between multiple different opponents, hold it in her hand, use it to bash opponents, etc. So definitely very versatile, plus being a professor, a fully trained huntsman, she's doing some pretty heavy damage to everyone around her. Neptune, Fox, and Yatsuhashi who are fighting her, and they're continually getting drained where she seems to have no damage done against her. So in this fight, we also find out what Runepole's semblance is, and it's something I previously thought not possible in the RWBY series. That someone's semblance, using aura, could have a permanent effect or change on the environment around them, or like the molecules of items around them. She can touch inorganic material and literally turn it to gold. She can only turn things into gold and can't manipulate it any more than that, but she can literally perform alchemy. You know, she has a ball of lead, she can turn it to gold, she can turn anything into gold. That is an insane semblance because she manipulates the actual element that is in the molecules and changes them to a different molecule. She shifts the atoms. That is insanely broken, but still a interesting semblance to have. She can only do it to inorganic material. She can't actually change people themselves, but if they're wearing a jacket, like Neptune was, she can turn that to gold, and she does. And Neptune's pretty much left immobile because he can't really move wearing something that heavy. But when Yatsuhashi and Fox are fighting her after that point, Yatsuhashi is able to get close enough where he can get a hand on her forehead and uses his memory wiping abilities, as much as he doesn't like to erase the last half hour of her memory. And once he does that, she kind of snaps out of it and was like, where am I? What's going on here? And she realizes, like, oh my god, did I do that to you? Like seeing Neptune covered in gold, etc. And he's like, yeah, can you help me out with this? And this is where we find out that she can't actually turn things back, but Runepole turns to Theodore and says that the new team assignments, all of the things that were suggested over the last couple of weeks, that wasn't me. Someone was manipulating my mind, or at least made me believe that I was loyal to the crown, that I was to disrupt Shade Academy and everything going on here. This wasn't me. Someone was controlling my mind. So we find out that the crown itself has a member, the higher-ups, etc., that can manipulate people's minds and force them to be loyal to the crown. And it seems that Yatsuhashi's semblance of manipulating memory breaks the person's hold on anyone that they've controlled up to that point. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting and a very useful ability that Yatsuhashi has. At the same time as this fight with Runepole was going on, Team Rosie was out on a mission in the wastelands of Vacuo, an area near the city of Vacuo where Grim activity had been increasing, and Team Rosie was sent there to reduce the Grim population. The team consisting of Reese Cloris, Olive Gashley, Scarlet David, and Coco Adele. And they had been out there for a few days already. It was currently evening, so Coco was keeping watch while the rest of her team was sleeping when the perimeter alarms went off. Coco figured, well, I'll go see how many Grim they are, I'll wake the others if needed, etc. So she goes out there, sees about a half a dozen Grim out there going to attack someone. And that person ended up being, as Coco found, Carmen Esclados. And so Coco sat there and watched a little bit as Carmen was dealing with the Grim. Eventually, though, it seemed like Carmen was having a bit of trouble, and Coco, being, you know, the huntress, the noble, etc., kind of went in and helped Carmen, even though it would have been fair and completely fine just leaving Carmen to the Grim. So she helped Carmen deal with that and fought side by side with her, and they fought actually pretty well together, it seemed. And then Carmen turned on Coco, of course. And Coco was getting overwhelmed by Carmen. Carmen had stronger aura than before and wasn't really able to do much against her and started becoming buried in the sand that Carmen was controlling with her telekinetic semblance. So as Coco became completely buried alive, the rest of her team showed up and started fighting with Carmen. And then Coco was still currently buried, and to get herself out of that, she used her hype semblance to explode the dust in her bag and damage herself, as well as blow a giant hole in the ground and send Carmen flying, though with her increased aura, she didn't have any problem with it, was able to recover really easily, and thanks to Coco's fear from being buried alive, you know, enclosed spaces aren't really Coco's strong suits, etc., more Grim were coming, Carmen fled, and now Team Rosie was in a bit of a pickle. But cutting back to Vacuo, where Neptune and Yatsuhashi have gone to Mirage. They were able to get armbands from Runepole that seemingly everyone who was in league with the Crown was wearing, so they were able to disguise themselves as Mirage supporters or the Crown supporters, and Runepole also gave them the passcode to get into the place, so they were able to get into the Fight Club, you know, pretty easily, handed over their weapons, no problems whatsoever, and Fox didn't go with them because he had heard about Rosie's mission in the desert and that they hadn't checked in a while. So he, along with a few other people, went to go assist them in that. But Yatsuhashi and Neptune, when they got into the Mirage Fight Club, the person in the cage was actually Sun, and he was on a winning streak, having a great time, crown on his head, hanging from the bars of the cage with his tail, using his clones to fight, etc. And the crowd absolutely loved him. But more important to Yatsuhashi was the bunny ears that he saw poking out of the crowd not too far away. So he pushed himself through the crowd and found Velvet there, who seemed very much at home at Mirage. She loved it there, she said. It was the place where she felt most at home. And so Yatsuhashi wiped a couple seconds of her memory, and all of a sudden, Velvet was very happy to see Yatsu, and everything that was going on kind of confused her a little bit, that there was someone who manipulated her mind, etc. So Yatsuhashi was able to break her hold fairly easily, and then volunteered himself to go fight in the cage. And as he was fighting against Sun, he was able to grab Sun by the head, wipe a couple seconds of his memory, and then grabbed him by the tail, swung him around, and threw him hard enough to bust out the door of the cage, and he went flying. And then the announcer said, well, we have another challenger for you, big guy. And in walks Carmen Esclados, though she's wielding her weapons, so it's not necessarily a fair fight. The cage match is supposed to be without weapons, but Carmen, of course, is an exception to the rules. And very quickly, Yatsuhashi is defeated and captured. Where, as Neptune, Sun, and Velvet, now that they are free from the control, or at least Velvet and Sun were free from the control, they were able to escape Mirage. But Yatsuhashi was captured. We then go to the mission of Rosie in the desert, and they are surrounded by Grimm. They had found an old, like, Atlesian mining rig, and they were hiding within it so that the Deathstalkers couldn't get to them, but they were struggling. Their aura was low, and they were having to kind of go out, make a couple attacks, and then come back to shelter, recover their aura a little bit to go out and do that again, etc. Coco was out of bullets, and they were in pretty dire straits. But luckily, Fox showed up with a few other people and handed Coco some more bullets and gave them some support, and they were able to take out the remaining Grimm fairly easily. Fox told the rest of Team Rosie that Runepole had told him that the Wastelands are actually the home base for the Crown, and that's why there's increased Grimm activity there. And so they needed to find the entrance to this home base. This is where Olive Gashley's weapon comes in. She is able to use gravity dust to create gravity waves, and Coco was able to use her semblance to hype up that dust and was able to pretty much create like a giant wave of gravity dust that cut through the sand and revealed the opening to a mine. So all of the people there went into the mine, although Nolan stayed guard alone up top, which honestly, considering the guy had lost his entire team, that's pretty brave of him to do that. Standing alone to guard against any Grimm or any other people of the Crown who would come looking, well, that's pretty brave, honestly. And he was still able to keep in contact with Fox's TeamSpeak, etc., as everyone went into the mines. And when they got to the mines, they reached a fork in the road, but they were able to find the correct way to go, thanks to Fox's semblance, sensing aura, etc. And so they get to a wide opening where they see something pretty interesting. They see a woman sitting upon a throne that had been carved out of the rock, and her aura is visible to the naked eye. Normally, when someone has their aura cloak up, it's only visible when they take damage, when it shimmers, or when it breaks. But this woman's, her aura was glowing a rainbow of colors, and everyone could easily see it. Fox, being able to only see auras through his semblance, said that it was brighter than anything he had seen. He can't focus on it very much, for it causes him a headache, etc. This woman's aura was godly strong, and they find out why that is. She's able to go to the beds that are behind her. We see there are dozens of beds with people lying unconscious, each with aura meters, and she's able to lay a hand on them and drain their aura into herself. She's talking to another person in the room, the pink person that we saw Sun fight against at the beginning of this book, whose name is Rosa, and she refers to this godly woman as Jillian, and Jillian says to call the rest of the army. The rest of the army, being other people that have been kidnapped and are following the Crown, or, you know, just followers of the crown, and they walk up, and all of a sudden Team Coffee, or Team Rosie, and everyone else realizes that they are outmatched. They need to retreat and get back to Shade Academy and report what they've seen, because they are about to attack Vacuo. And this person with the insane aura is going to be a real problem, because she's been boosting every one of the fighters. She can take aura from those people who are being, you know, on the beds and she's absorbing aura from, and give it to other people. So we end up going back to Shade Academy, where we see Team Coffee, Team Sun, and everyone meeting with Theodore and telling them everything that happened. And then they come to the realization that Jill is someone who used to be enrolled at Shade Academy. When Coco was able to film them and get an image of Jill, she's able to show it to Theodore and Runepole, and they call up, you know, a little display of her profile. And we see that she is actually the twin brother of Jax, Jack and Jill. And Sun realizes that, oh, that was one of the persons, or actually Neptune's the one who realizes. Sun had bailed on that little interview, but Finn Asturias, the person that Neptune was interviewing, that was the boring person that Sun was referring to, is their father. Jax and Jill are his children that went missing. So they go back and go to interrogate Finn again. He was just preparing to, you know, skip town, so they were a bit curious about that. But after showing Finn the image of Jillian on his scroll, then he kind of sits down and tells them everything. That they were twins born in unique circumstances. That Luna, his wife, when she was, you know, carrying them in the womb, her aura was continuously being reduced, so much so to the point that when she went into labor, she did not survive. And when the twins were born, Jillian had very strong aura, but Jax had almost nothing. That pretty much Jillian had siphoned all of Jax's aura in the womb, and so when he was born, he just didn't have much. Her semblance works a bit differently, though. She isn't able to permanently steal someone else's aura. It's just that she can take it temporarily and gift it to others or use it herself. It does fade with time. She's not able to permanently steal aura, and she cannot steal all of someone's aura. That is specifically said because that would be a pretty much insta-kill semblance if she could grab hold of someone and just immediately drain them of their entire soul and just leave them to die. But when in the womb, it worked a little bit differently because she was still growing, maturing, developing her own soul, and siphoning the aura from Jax. So when Jax was born, he had no aura, had no semblance, and his father, Finn, had no idea that he had a semblance. But upon growing older, Finn was able to teach his daughter Jillian how to control her semblance. Since she was, you know, had siphoned all of that aura from Jax in the womb, she had a very strong aura of her own and was able to give some of it to Jax, constantly supplying him with aura so that he could, you know, function normally, that he wasn't weak and frail like normal. And once he got all of this aura, he was able to experiment on his own and figure out that he did have a semblance. Jillian went to Shade Academy because she wanted to be a huntress, but Jax only just followed her there. And apparently he seemed quite arrogant, etc. I'm kind of mixing the things that were said by Finn, their father, and Theodore and Runepole for when they were teaching them, but still, Jax was a bit of an arrogant student and was actually expelled from Shade Academy. And then Jillian soon followed him very close behind. So after that happened, then people started going missing, and they started putting 2 and 2 together. And there's actually a reason given for Jax's arrogance, that he's been told his entire life by his father that he is the heir to the throne of Vacuo. Finn shows everyone who's there a birthmark that he has on his ankle of an upside-down crown, saying that this birthmark is passed from generation to generation, showing the lineage of the Vacuan royalty. And one person in every generation has this birthmark, but Jillian and Jax are the first to have both having the heir to the throne of Vacuo. And it's very interesting that he says this because a lot of people start questioning it. They're like, you just believe these legends and these stories that are passed down, and Finn actually references Ozpin, saying that he had read something from Ozpins that said we had to learn from stories, that they came from somewhere. There are some lessons behind it, and they always carry some truth to it. And so upon hearing that, everyone kind of thinks, well, maybe there is some truth to it if it came from Ozpin, and says, okay, we need to take you to Theodore's office, you need to tell him this yourself, etc. So that's where they all go, And then we briefly see that Yatsuhashi is now in the mines, sitting in front of this throne, which now Jax is sitting on. And he ends up wiping Yatsu's memory, or at least making him under his own control, brainwashing him. Jax is the one that has the semblance to mind control people. Jillian is the one who has the power to take people's aura and gift it to others. And so together they can create this giant army. And so Jax, now having brainwashed Yatsuhashi, says it's time to march on Vacuo, and takes the army and heads off to go do that. We cut back to Vacuo in Theodore's office, where Team Coffee and Team Sun, as well as Finn, are all filling Theodore and Runepole in on everything that has been going on. At this point, the teams have been reinstated. Team Coffee is back together, as well as Team Sun, after Runepole came clean about being brainwashed and the entire reinitiation thing being something that the Crown put her up to disrupt Shade Academy. All the teams have been put back together, everything's right in the world. But we had seen Theodore's office a couple times before, and Velvet notices that there's some differences. Theodore had a habit of taking pictures with everyone that was members of Ozpin's inner circle. Ozpin himself, Crow Bronwyn, as well as Lionheart and Ironwood. And Velvet notices that the pictures with Ironwood and Lionheart are now gone, nowhere to be seen, and Ozpin's picture is taking the center stage. So Theodore may have learned some information during all of this that, well, Leo might have been a traitor, and something else about Ironwood to make him not too fond of him, so that might be hinting at something to come later on, possibly in a sequel novel, possibly in just the later of RWBY. Maybe this is taking place after Volume 8, not really sure, but still. Anyways, as this conversation is going on, things start to pick up quite quickly. They hear gunfire and cannon fire outside. The Crown Army has arrived at the walls of Shade Academy and are trying to bring it down. So the discussions kind of end at that point. Everyone jumps outside to go fight. Theodore and Runepole make an announcement to the students saying that Shade Academy is under attack. Come and fight for Vacuo. And at that point, they decide to devise a plan. After seeing that Jax is sitting on a throne being carried by Umber and Yatsuhashi, they realize that Jillian isn't there right now. That they need to prevent her from getting there, because the entire Crown Army is already boosted by having excess aura, but Jillian, being the powerhouse that she is, if she arrives and boosts everyone even more, that's going to be very problematic. They realize she's probably still out at the Wastelands being a reserve force, so they decide to send someone out there to try and prevent her from getting to the main battle. And so they send Velvet, because she's essentially a one-person army with her photographic memory and Isadora, etc., and she's accompanied by Sun and Octavia. So they head out to the Wastelands while the battle is going on at Shade Academy. And so they get to the Wastelands and find that they're kind of already too late, that Jillian had already left. And so they decide to leave Sun behind in this room where he starts waking up all of the people that had been used as aura machines, essentially. Aura batteries, pretty much. And since he recognizes most of them, that's where he wants to be right now. Waking them up and trying to make sure that everyone is okay, where Velvet and Octavia run after down another one of the passageways to find Jillian. And they do find her, accompanied by 3 other huntsmen as well as Carmen Esclados. So they're a bit outnumbered. Velvet decides to take on Carmen, and Octavia is taking on 3 other huntsmen. And needless to say, it's not going that well, because Jillian has already boosted all of them with aura, and so they're kinda losing. However, this was a dust mine that had previously caved in. The dust is still there, so Velvet turns to Octavia and says, "Hey, light it up." And so Octavia uses some of her fire dust to ignite the rest of the fire dust in the cave and bring the entire place down, or explode the place, making it very unstable, but still not a good situation for really anyone to be in. Sun, hearing this explosion from where he is, gets worried about Velvet and Octavia. As he's waking up everyone who is there, trying to make sure that everyone is okay, Bertolac ends up being one of the people who was left unconscious. Apparently his usefulness had worn out and was more useful as a battery than otherwise. He didn't really seem that pissed off about it, that it was just a job anyways, money is money, but still, Sun is a bit wary of the guy because he used to be an enemy. This time, though, it seems like Bertolac is actually willing to help him out, and so Sun, along with the 50 other people that he woke up, Bertolac included, go down this mine to find Velvet and Octavia, see if everything's okay, and they find everyone who was there buried in the rubble. The 3 huntsmen, as well as Octavia, they are able to dig her out, Bertilac is actually helping with this, though once they get to where Velvet is, Carmen Esclados' Sai is lying next to her, and Bertilac is about to go and just slam the ground anyways, or the unconscious person underneath the rubble. Not really checking to see who it was first, just assuming with the Sai it was Carmen, but no, it ended up being Velvet. Luckily, Sun was able to stop Bertilac from doing that, so yeah. Anyways, Velvet is seemingly like barely alive at this point after being buried in rubble, but thankfully she is okay, she is alive, and Bertilac kind of runs off on his own, saying that he's going to find Carmen and give her what she deserves, probably going to beat her down, his ex-partner, etc. And so Sun, along with Octavia and Velvet and the other survivors of all of this, it seems everyone survived. They weren't, drained completely of their aura, because Jillian doesn't have that power, needed them as batteries, was keeping them alive, etc. And they were able to get to the mining equipment where it seemed like an abandoned relay tower was. Velvet was able to hack into this and send out an announcement to everyone in Vacuo. Sun was the one who gave the announcement, though, because he is a native of Vacuo and hopefully people would listen to him. But meanwhile, at the battle that's going on at Shade Academy, well, things aren't really exactly going that well for the students at Shade Academy, because the Crown Army is full of people with powerful semblances and also boosted with extra aura. Coco has decided to fight against Yatsuhashi, trying to see if, are you bluffing, are you faking it, or are you actually under their control? And while fighting against Yatsuhashi, that's enough of a routine, enough of something that Yatsuhashi is used to, that he was able to get back into control slightly, or at least enough to activate his own semblance on himself and free himself from Jax's control. He still kept up the charade, though, telling Coco that, hey, I'm back in control now, but let's keep this going, try to get me close to where Jax is. As this fight is going on, Fox is trying to communicate to everyone through TeamSpeak of what's going on, and he ends up fighting against Umber Gorgonian, because her semblance actually can't work against a blind person, interestingly enough, and so that's not going well for him. She's using her whips to, take him down, wrap around his ankles, and trip him up. Fox is kind of disoriented because there are so many minds, in this battle all at one time. He's hard to keep track of everything. So everyone seems to be struggling. But at this point, the Grimm show up, because of course they do. A giant battle is going on, people are scared, things aren't really going that great, so yeah, it's not going too well. The Grimm show up though and start mainly attacking the people of the Crown. Very interesting that happens. And then Jillian shows up as well. Coco goes to attack Jillian, and Theodore actually ends up attacking Yatsuhashi. And this is where we see Theodore's power. He was actually the first one to throw a punch against the Crown Army, and one punch was able to send numerous people flying backwards. The dude in his ruby gloves has gravity crystals in it, so when he throws a punch, it sends a giant wave outwards. And I think it was either Coco or Fox had suggested to Theodore that, hey, get Yatsuhashi close to Jax so he can disorient his memory and break his hold on the group of people that he's controlling. So Theodore's solution to that was to not say a word to Yatsuhashi, because he wanted to fight him anyways, and just punches him and sends him flying. So it turns out that Yatsuhashi ends up just narrowly missing Jax, unfortunately, as Jax starts fighting a little bit himself, and Coco starts fighting against Jillian. Of course, she is vastly outmatched, and unfortunately, Jillian is able to grab a hold of Coco and start draining her aura, because she literally doesn't have to worry about taking any damage, even from Jianduja, Coco's Gatling gun. So, yeah, Jillian is an incredible fighter. She fights actually with just a typical bow and arrow and can still do a lot with it. She would have been a good huntress, but unfortunately followed a different path. But Coco sees the birthmark that's on her arm, and this is only mentioned once, but Coco mentions to her that's your birthmark? That looks more like a brand than a birthmark. Did your father do that to you, or did you do that yourself? And Jillian looks at it curiously, like, is it actually fake? I don't know. She doesn't say that, but she looks at it curiously, and then it's never mentioned again in the book. I don't know if things were getting rushed or what happened here, but it's interesting that this might have been faked from the beginning. Anyways, though, as Jillian is curious about this, Coco's kind of laying on the ground, exhausted, having her aura drained, and a Ravager shows up and picks Jillian up and just carries her away. Of course, not that far. Jillian is able to put an arrow into its head, drop down, and not really any harmed by it, but at least she's away from Coco. Now, as she lands, it seems the Grimm are drawn to her more than anyone else, and Fox realizes that the Grimm are only attacking the members of the Crown Army. Yatsuhashi saw a Grimm charging towards him, but it went right past him towards a member of the Crown. So it's putting two and two together. Fox sends this message out to everyone on the battlefield, the Crown soldiers included. Hey, it seems like the Grimm are actually attracted to those with the pretty aura. Those who have boosted aura, the Grimm are attracted to, implying that the Grimm might be attracted to more than just negative emotions, but strong sources of aura, of soul, that the Grimm might be attracted to the soul itself, and that is what they hunt, which is an interesting little bit of a lore piece on that. But with that being the case, that starts setting panic out into the crowd, and the aura is being lessened as Jillian is fighting numerous people as they're all closing in and attacking her. Her aura is actually being depleted. And so she makes eye contact with Jax, and they end up going to meet each other. Jax ends up fighting his way to Jill, and they end up meeting. And at that point, they realize that they're fighting a losing battle, that they're not going to win this. But Jack's solution to this is to just go out on the battlefield. They're both going to die together. Jill, realizing that he intends for them to die, doesn't want to die. And so her solution to this is to try to kill Jax. She takes back all of the aura that she had gifted him, leaving him weak and auraless, so that a bullet whizzes by and hits him in the arm. This breaks his concentration and his control over everyone else of the Crown, and so the battlefield is really in disarray at this point. Then Jax grabs a hold of Jill, and I'm assuming orders her to give him all of her aura. And so she does. Jax is now powered up with all of Jill's aura, and it's not going so well. Yatsuhashi runs over and tries to grab him and use his semblance to make Jax forget, but Jax is now using his semblance on Yatsuhashi to try to control him again. And it's going back and forth, and Jill, from the ground, grabs Yatsuhashi and grabs Jax and transfers aura over to Yatsuhashi. So he's now a lot stronger. And as Yatsuhashi is just forcing all of that into his semblance, Jax goes completely limp. His memory seems to be wiped clean, and yeah, Yatsuhashi feels pretty bad about that he just literally made someone essentially a potato. So this is actually where the book ends. Yatsuhashi has made Jax just completely blank slate. Velvet went over to Yatsuhashi and was like, hey, everything, you did what you had to do. Are you okay? And Yatsuhashi kind of pulls away from Velvet. And then this is where it ends. There is a bit of an epilogue where Sun goes to his family dojo. He kind of reunites with Team Sun, apologizes to them, and has a little conversation, goes to his family's dojo, and Velvet goes with them, and they are invited inside, etc. And his cousin says something very interesting. She looks up into the sky and says, a storm is brewing. And then that's where it officially ends. That's the last page in the book. And so it's a bit of a rushed ending, I think. I would have liked a little bit more to see what happens afterwards, see how many members of the Crown were actually imprisoned, the students at Shade Academy who are sleeper agents for the Crown, etc. Learn more about different semblances and things like that, because we still didn't get Sage's semblance. I would have really liked to see more of him in the book, but again, constraints with the book, having so many characters, the plot that they wanted to follow, I completely understand why things went the way it did. I still really like the book and highly recommend for anyone to pick it up. Hopefully my breakdown of this made sense, but there are a couple things that I want to touch on in particular throughout the story of this book. Theodore had mentioned a couple times whenever the Crown was brought up that this problem needed to be dealt with right now. He always said that the Crown is not the biggest problem. There is a much bigger fight that we are going to have to face. He never explicitly said that Salem exists, she's coming to steal the relics, we need to prepare for that, the Crown is nothing compared to her. But still, that's something that he's been focusing on and hinting at this entire time. Team Coffee and Team Sun are still in the dark about Salem's existence and the existence of the relics, the maidens, etc., but Theodore is definitely paranoid about that. Understandably so, considering that 2 out of the 4 Huntsman Academies were already taken out, and he is headmaster of one of the remaining ones, guarding the Relic of Destruction, which is potentially the most powerful relic. And so he's following a similar thought process as Ironwood, except Ironwood is, pretty much solely in control, and his paranoia is getting to him in a different way, whereas it seems Theodore has Runepole to keep him grounded. But Theodore definitely seems very loyal to Ozpin, which is good to see that, there's not going to be another traitor like Lionheart, but still, I'm really looking forward to seeing Theodore on screen, seeing how this is going to develop, and it seems like things are lining up with the finale of Volume 7, possibly Volume 8 or 9, depending on how these things ended up. Because at the end of the epilogue, when Sun's cousin said that a storm is brewing, I think that's implying of the shadow looming over Atlas, the Grimm attacking. Maybe after attacking Atlas, it's moving to Vacuo, and that's what it's hinting at, that there's going to be another battle immediately in Volume 9 or what have you, etc. So there's quite a few things that could potentially come of this. But this still begs the question, if Theodore is still so loyal to Ozpin, what was it that he found out that made him remove the picture of Ironwood from the wall along with the picture of Leonardo Lionheart? I completely understand Lionheart if he found out that he was a traitor, but the fact that Ironwood's picture was removed is very curious, and I want to know what it was that he found out. Is this taking place after Volume 8, after the truth of Ironwood, came out? Did he get a letter from Crow or someone else during the events of Before the Dawn that told him about what happened, the truth of what happened in Haven, and the truth about what's happening in Atlas, all the things that are going on in the world? There's a lot that could be happening during the timeline of this book, and I would really like to know how it lines up with the RWBY series itself. There is one other picture in Theodore's office that seems a bit interesting. It's of a young girl in kind of a patterned black and white dress, along with a small black dog. This could be referencing, Dorothy and Toto. It seems a pretty reasonable guess that that could be another reference to that, though I'm not sure what the connection would be. Velvet saw it and was curious about it and wondered if it was his daughter or something like that. We really get no expansion on it. There are a couple of things mentioned that we don't really get an expansion on, but still, it's interesting to note, and I would really like to explore Theodore's character more. Probably won't happen until we actually get to Vacuo, but still, he's going to be a character, and I'm looking forward to seeing him on screen. Now, one thing that was also mentioned is that Grimm are attracted to aura. This kind of implies that if Grimm are actually attracted to aura more so than emotions, then people like Jean, people with large reserves of aura, are going to be more of a magnet for Grimm. And that's going to be something interesting if we explore later on. It's something that we haven't actually seen in the RWBY series itself, that people with just larger amounts of aura, or have just awakened their aura in general. I don't think we've actually seen that Grimm are more attracted to huntsmen rather than just normal human beings, because huntsmen themselves, having awakened their aura, would be more vibrant with their aura than just regular humans. So I'm curious to see how that interaction is going to go. And there's a couple other things I want to mention in other videos, but overall, let me know what you guys think about this breakdown and analysis. And did I do a fairly good job of covering the plot of Before the Dawn and everything that happened with that? Do you guys want to read Before the Dawn? I highly recommend you do so if you are interested. There's quite a few things I skipped over into this breakdown because I didn't want to, just say every event that happened in the book, though I think I kind of did for the most part. Anyways, I've rambled long enough. If you are watching this, thank you so much for watching this long. Make sure to subscribe, join the Guild of the Eternal Flame if you are interested in more RWBY content, the Phoenix Festival Tournament, etc. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Tweet me at Phoenix Knight 7. Join our Discord server, link in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.